Hello, nerds. Welcome to the Geek Girl Story Salon, where I talk to creatives from across disciplines and across the world about the art of storytelling. I'm your host, Jen Jackalone, lifelong storyteller and head geek in charge. We've got some great guests coming up in the coming weeks, so be sure to smash that like and subscribe button to stay up to date on the heaping helpings of brain food coming your way, courtesy of our partners Fleet of Fandoms and Ilva Publishing. My guest today is an old friend, writer Sarah Cooke, whose comic No Spell Lasts Forever is a superpowered spin on 40s detective noir. Her Substack, Killer Tater Tots, is a hub for not only keeping up with her writing, but with comic life in general. How are you, Sarah?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is great.
Absolutely. It's been actually a really long time that we've known each other. I was thinking about this
Yeah.
as I was getting ready for the show. It's not quite 10 years, but I think it's coming close to that.
I was thinking about that too. Time flies.
It really does. And this might be the first or one of the first times that I can remember sitting down and having a really in-depth conversation about writing. So I'm kind of looking forward to
Yeah,
that.
same, which is funny because we've been in writing groups and in different groups together where we've
Yep.
talked about the subjects, but yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
So yeah, when I met you, you were doing screenwriting. That was sort of your focus. And the odd thing about screenplays is that you can write something brilliant and it can be really well received and, win all these awards and all of that, and like still never really get made or be brought to life.
Yeah.
Um, but you've always loved comics for as long as I've known you. So is there something to the idea of a comic format being easier to bring to life?
I think it's definitely easier to bring to life than film. um, just less expensive. Um, it's still if you're a writer who's not also an artist like me, and even for artists too, it can be difficult. If you're doing a lot of crowdfunding, and it's a difficult process still, but it's not like film, which is a good thing.
It's just, yes, and it's so daunting.
It
Um,
is.
um, was there anything different, like just from the writing perspective and how you had to think about story to kind of make that jump from screenwriting to
Yeah.
comic?
It's really interesting. And it's funny, in the kind of intervening years, I've done more comics writing.
Mhm.
The project I was working on when we first met was a web series called My Human Experience that I co-created with our mutual friend, Amy
Yes.
Danthero. Um, and I've done more comics writing since then, but I think one of the biggest differences as far as the writing and sort of imagining the visual storytelling is that
Mhm.
with screenwriting, you're not writing what happens shot by shot. You're explaining the action of a scene and the dialogue and all of that, but the shot list that's for the director to determine.
Mhm.
Um, but when you're writing a comic, you really do. You're describing what happens in each panel. Um, and so it's kind of a different way of thinking about how you have to tell this story visually.
Mhm.
If there's an object in a panel that you need later in the scene, you have to be sure that in an earlier panel you've described that, and it's kind of a little bit more granular in that way, I guess, than
Mhm.
screenwriting.
Sure. And then what about in terms of thinking about story structure? I imagine you kind of have to think almost like in chunks more than you would for screenwriting. Is that true?
It is, yeah. When you're looking at the overall structure of the whole story, whether it's a
Hmm.
whole like 4 or 6 issue comic series or a whole movie,
Hmm.
it's pretty much the same. It's 3 act structure. But the way that you have to break it down by issue,
Hmm.
if you're doing a series, is definitely different. Um, I like it. I think I my brain just kind of thrives on like having that structure.
Hmm.
And I feel like it makes it easier for me to kind of break down just the action of the story in my own mind when I know that I have to have like a compelling ending every 20 to 24 pages, something like that.
Hmm.
Helps me with my pacing. I kind of prefer it, I think, in that
Hmm.
way.
Hmm.
Um, but it is different. And not only that, but then fitting things into a page, and you can only have ideally like maybe 6 panels or less per page, and 30 something words per panel. You have to be a lot more, I guess, strategic in that way with it too.
Right. You have to really think about, okay, what's important? What, how can I get the most bang for my word buck or my image buck or whatever, like, right?
Yeah, exactly. Which can be tricky
Yeah.
when you're trying to do all of that and then fit it into the correct number of pages. And, you want to have, like, if there's a big exciting moment that happens, you want to have it happen on a page turn so that it happens on the left side of the left page and not, a right hand page. And all of these things, I kind of, it's like putting together a puzzle.
Mm.
Which is interesting, and I think helps me a lot with my organization, but is also challenging too.
Right. Well, I mean, there's something to be said for playing tennis with a net. So,
Yeah, exactly.
So did you have a love for that sort of 40s noir kind of style before you started writing No Spell Lasts Forever, or was that something that you kind of cultivated and got more into once you started it?
Um, I think I really kind of loved like the aesthetics of noir.
Mhm.
And there were certain movies, like I've loved Casablanca since the first time I saw it in high school. I don't know how many times I've seen it since then. And The Big Sleep, that's the one that's kind of the main influence for the protagonist of No Spell. I think I love the aesthetics, just like the fashion from that perspective, but then also just the look of it, like the shadows and the like rainy cities with rain like on the fluorescent lights with the rain dripping down the windows. It's so, I feel like emo in a lot of ways, and I love that about it. It's so emotional.
There's a
And
drama to it.
exactly, yeah.
So did
And
you do anything to prepare for writing this type of story? Did you watch movies? Did you like dig into some other writing, or what did you do anything to prepare in that way?
yeah, I watched and rewatched some movies. I went back to some comics, like Long Halloween and Year One, and some of the comics that have more of a noir aesthetic, and dug up a bunch of pages from those to send to Ime Holly, who's the artist I worked with on issue 1. So it was a lot of going back into movies and comics.
Excellent. So have you done any imagining about who you might cast as your leads if it was ever made into a film, or who you might want to direct? Have you dared to dream about that at all?
I've thought about it a little. If I could have like my dream casting,
Okay.
I feel like Rosette would be like either Florence Pugh or Zoe Kravitz would be a good Rosette.
Hmm.
Um, I think Diego Luna would be a good Bash. He's a little bit older than the character, but I think he could play younger. Like I feel like Cassian Andor is a little bit younger than Diego Luna himself.
Well, he's a little bit of like a baby face kind of thing, I
I
think.
think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think he
Yeah.
could pull it off.
Mhm.
um, yeah, and it's for directors. I've sorry. I think Matt Reeves, I was thinking.
Okay.
I've lost the Zoom window here.
Oh.
Where did you go? Okay, you're back.
Oh,
Sorry about
okay.
that.
No, no, not at all.
I minimized that window by mistake and then couldn't find it. But I think Matt Reeves would be great, or Kate Herron, who directed the Loki series, would be great if I could have anyone.
Mm. I 100% endorse those choices. So you finished the first issue, and anybody that's been paying attention to what you've been doing have sort of been watching you push that rock up the hill.
Yeah. Yep.
So all right, so are you gonna do another GoFundMe for the second issue, or what's the plan?
Yeah. So Amy Holly was not able to continue on with issue 2, which is completely understandable. She works full time and she takes classes, and I don't know how she pulled off issue 1, honestly, without just totally collapsing in exhaustion.
Mm.
But the artist, Easy de Savino, who did the back cover art and then some of the interior cover art and the promo images for the first issue, is going to be doing the second issue. And he started on some of the inks, and they're looking really awesome, which is exciting. So we're hoping to be doing the Kickstarter for issue 2 sometime this summer. I don't have a definite date for it yet, but I'm hoping for sometime around the end of the summer / early fall.
Okay, and I'm guessing you're going to announce that on Killer Tater Tots.
Yeah.
All right. So anybody who's interested in that, if you're watching on YouTube, the link to Sarah's Substack will be in the comments below. So I've also seen another project of yours that's been getting a little bit of attention, which is Scorned April. So I want to know what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that one is it's also an urban fantasy. It was originally a series. I'm thinking of potentially pitching it as a graphic novel just because of its length. It is fairly long. But it's about a journalism student at a fictional Cambridge Ivy League school. And for her kind of final investigative project, she's looking into this urban legend called Scorned April, where these 2 grad students at her school back in the 60s were found dead. And the urban legend is kind of that their names are April and Alistair. That April was the killer, that she was this like scorned lover, and when he rejected her advances, she killed him and then took her own life. And so Reggie, the protagonist, like doesn't buy that narrative at all, and is looking into it to try to uncover the actual truth. She figures out that there are kind of some of the most powerful people in the city who have a demon basically at their disposal, are responsible for it. So she kind of puts herself in the crosshairs of these people by trying to uncover the truth of this story.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. So what's the plan with that? Are you going to Kickstarter that one, or are you going to try and get that made through the contest circuit?
Yeah, I think I'm going to try to pitch that one to some publishers, just kind of why I'm thinking maybe the graphic novel route. But I think I'm going to try to go that route first. And then kickstarting it is definitely always an option too.
Sure. So I wanted to say, because as long as I've known you, inclusivity has been a big part of whatever stories you've been telling. Particularly like LGBTQ, but in general, like diversity and inclusion seems to have been really important to the stories that you're writing. Can you talk a little about how that might take shape in the stuff you're working on now?
Yeah, I think it's definitely important for everything that I write. And I think what it is for me is about like narratively centering characters who aren't straight white men. I think there are a lot of, in more recent years, I think we've seen a lot of creators telling stories that kind of more deeply dive into I don't know, the identities of the creators and what their experiences have been. And as a straight white person, those aren't necessarily my stories to tell, but I think what I need to be doing and want to be doing in my stories is just centering characters who aren't straight white men, so that their perspectives and their experiences within the story are what drive the action of the story, and they're not just there as tokens or to kind of further the story of the main male protagonist. And that's the case with Scorned April too. It's our lead character is a queer woman, and one of the main supporting characters is her love interest. Same for No Spell. It's I don't think I've written anything where the lead character is a white man, actually. Now that I'm thinking about it, not that would be bad, but I think it's just, for me, it's about seeing them as the protagonists and not just seeing them always as supporting characters, or not seeing them as and not fully fleshed out real people.
Yeah, well, it's a tricky needle to thread, isn't it?
It
Because
is.
it's not the balance, I think, that you have to strike, and it's hard, is to acknowledge that character's experience. If you're writing whatever,
Hmm.
if you're writing a gay black man,
Hmm.
acknowledging those things that you can understand about their experience without necessarily centering the story around that. For
Yeah.
example, I would, I would write a gay black male protagonist in like an adventure story or a mystery or whatever,
Yeah.
where the story wasn't about that it was centered, that wasn't centered around
Yeah.
his experience as a black man. It was centered around the mystery he's trying to solve or whatever, but while still acknowledging that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's and with Scorned April, it's the main character is a queer woman, and that's especially because we see her relationship play out. It is an important part of who she is, but that's not what the story is about. But she is at the center of the action of the story, and she's kind of driving everything that happens.
Right. So that part of her character is sort of informs her and her decisions and what she does, but it
Hmm.
isn't about that.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because it's hard, and one thing that you see a lot in film and TV is they put a queer character in a story and you're immediately stuck, all of a sudden it becomes a coming out story,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
Yeah.
That's
Hmm.
that's the trope. And much as I loved Supergirl, for example,
Hmm.
Alex Danvers, I loved that they made her gay, but it was like, oh, so we're gonna have another coming out story. Okay.
Yeah. And especially like that can be done so well, but it shouldn't be the only story that's told. And I don't think that's the right story for me to be telling because I haven't lived it.
Right. Yeah. So that's I mean, I enjoy that, and I think you do too, sort of trying to dig in and kind of find a different perspective, but there is that
Yeah.
needle to thread.
Yeah, for sure.
What do you do usually when you have to prepare to write a character that's perspective is outside of your own experience?
I think a lot of it is just sensitivity readers
Mhm.
and just talking to people who have had the experience.
Mhm.
um, and making sure that what I'm saying actually makes sense.
Mhm.
But just getting out of my own head and getting feedback, I think, is the most important thing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, it can be a great experience. It can be a growth experience for a writer to do that.
Yeah, even with like No Spell Lasts Forever, the main character is a Rosette, who I mentioned earlier, I think. She's a magic user, and they're called conjurers, and it's sort of a fictional type of magic user. She's not based on witches or anything. It's a fictional kind of magical classification that I
Mhm.
created for the story, but I wanted to make sure that I wasn't running up against any tropes about Wicca or anything that would be interpreted in a way that I didn't want it to be. And so I reached out a lot trying to make sure that everything that I was doing, even though she's not Wicca herself, I just didn't want to be furthering any kind of tropes or anything.
Mhm.
Um, I think that's always important.
Yeah,
Just
and
get out of your own head.
well, and it's funny because witches, like, that's one that people don't think of a lot of the time.
Yeah.
They
Hmm.
don't, people forget, like, no, for some people, this is actually a religion, and,
Right.
you know,
Yeah. I, which is I because a lot of what I write has to do with magic, and so I've kind of thought about this a lot, and I think that people only think of witches as kind of um with the broomstick and the hat, like the fictionalized version of it, but it's a real religion for people living in the real world.
yeah, yeah. Well, like I just remembered, in Hocus Pocus, when that was coming out, like Kathy Najimy being the one to say, hey, have we checked this with actual practicing witches to make sure this
Yeah,
is okay?
exactly.
Which I thought was really cool, but it's also, it's just good practice.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I specifically didn't want to make Rosette an actual witch. In a really early draft of it, I was kind of referring to her as a witch, but I sort of checked myself on that. And I said, like, I just don't know enough about this to be the person to write this
Mhm.
story. So I'm just going to make up my own kind of magical designation. Um, I felt like, yeah, for me to try to presume that I knew enough was kind of a little bit of overstepping.
Yeah, well, I mean, what's interesting is the particular power that she has, and I guess I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil it, but the particular power that she has is something that it could sit in the magic category, but it could also kind of sit in like a superhero, superpower kind of
Yeah.
story as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it could. And it's like in the comic, it's referred to as magic, but I mean, it could be a super, it's a super powered type of magic, I guess.
Mhm.
It fits into that category a little bit too.
Yeah, well, you are a superhero person as well,
I
which
am, yes.
even if you weren't sitting in front of the Gotham poster,
Yeah.
I would know that. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that you sort of framed it in this way that's unique to the world. Um, it's very solid world building.
Oh, thanks.
Congratulations on that.
Thanks.
Um, so I want to ask about stories serve a lot of purposes for the creators and the audience.
Mhm.
It can be therapy, it can just be connecting, it can be teaching a lesson. Even when it's just, okay, I'm trying to entertain, usually we want the stories that we're consuming to reflect our values.
Mhm.
Um, and certainly it's usually not ever only one thing for a person.
Mhm.
But what would you say for you is the primary purpose for your storytelling?
I think I think kind of the primary thing is making an emotional connection. um, so taking kind of my experiences and feelings and opinions and like funneling them into a story in a way that's going to resonate with readers and hopefully make them feel like they see something of themselves in that, or like they see something in a new way. um, I think it starts off, I think it starts off with that kind of emotional connection. And then from there, you can kind of, whether you're trying to like teach something or trying to uh, share your perspective on a particular issue, all of that can, which I do that in my stories too. And I think that is important, at least for me, to have a perspective and a message that the story is kind of built around. Uh, but I think you kind of do that by starting off with really focusing on how am I going to connect emotionally.
Mm.
Um, and then you can share your message, or you can teach or entertain, or any of that in sort of varying degrees depending on the particular story.
But the connection is the most important thing,
I think so.
because I guess you can't really do those other things unless you've connected.
Right. And like, I wouldn't want to tell a story that I think didn't have a message or didn't have, yeah, I guess a message is the right way to put it. I wouldn't, for me, I wouldn't want to tell a story that I felt like was just for only entertainment. And not that, I mean, there are plenty of stories that are like that I love. Um, but that's just kind of not how my writing tends to be. Uh, so I do, it is important to me to have like a message and a larger sort of idea that I'm trying to connect with the reader around. But I think it starts with that emotional connection first.
Sure.
If that makes sense at
No,
all.
absolutely. That totally makes sense. So, I mean, it must really be meaningful for you when someone reads something of yours and comes back to you and says, hey, it really made me happy to see this particular
Yeah, yeah,
representation or whatever.
exactly. Yeah. For sure. If someone comes back to me and they connected with the story in some kind of real way, that's huge.
So, do you are there any blatant self-inserts in any of your stories?
um, I don't think they're self-inserts, but there are definitely parts of me in, I think in No Spell and in Scorned April, because they both kind of have to deal with, I think, characters overcoming their insecurities about themselves. In Rosette's case, she kind of has a like a dramatic family history and has always felt kind of like rejected by her families and by the magical guild that she was a part of, by her family, singular. And so she kind of, as a result of that, like kind of feeling that way as a kid, has grown up to have these sort of beliefs about herself and insecurities. She's a criminal when we first meet her. And I think a part of that, in my own headcanon, a part of that, the reason why she sort of came to that life eventually is because she had these feelings about herself and kind of didn't let herself believe that like she could do more, I guess. And the same with Scorned April. Reggie kind of has this history with demons that she feels ashamed of, I guess. She doesn't, as she finds out, this isn't too much of a spoiler, hopefully, but she eventually finds out the truth about that history. But she has this like this big thing about herself that she feels kind of insecure about, and so a lot of it is her working out her insecurities about that too, which has definitely been something that I had to work through in my own life with my own insecurities and self-doubt. So I think it's I wouldn't say they're quite self-insert characters, but there are definitely parts of me in them for sure.
Yeah, I think that's how it works for most of us.
I think it's hard not to have that to some degree.
Yeah, I mean, occasionally you do see a blatant self-insert where
Yeah.
somebody's really just, yeah, okay, that's me, and
hmm
I'm working something out here.
Yeah.
um, which is valid. It's fine. I'm not, ripping on that because there's lots of great art that has been that.
Yeah.
Um, but I think for most of us, I know certainly for me, it's more that there are pieces of
hmm
myself that I put into the different characters so that I can
Yeah.
kind of relate to everybody in the story.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think you kind of have to do that if you're trying not to do that, not to put any of yourself into the character and just write this character who's so different from you. I think it kind of detracts from the character. I think part of what makes them feel like real people is that we've put part of ourselves into them.
Yeah. Yeah. People can tell when there's truth in it,
Yep, for
I think.
sure.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. Um, so what writer's work are influencing you right now?
Yeah, a lot of comic writers. I've been taking Scott Snyder's writing class
Mhm.
through his Substack. So I've been going back and reading some of his stuff that I hadn't already read. I love everything that he's read. I just read Barnstormers, which is one of his that I've been meaning to get to. But then obviously his Batman run and American Vampire, and so I've been kind of into the Scott Snyder stuff lately because of the class. James Tynion I've been reading a lot of. I love everything that he writes. Joelle Jones I've been and she's one of the ones actually who I went back to revisit for No Spell. She wrote a series called Lady Killer, that's about a woman in the 50s who's an assassin, And her kind of identity that everyone knows her as is this like 50s kind of Stepford housewife, but she's also secretly an assassin.
Oh my God.
Um, it's really good, and it's coming back, which I'm really excited about. It's been gone for a while. It's coming back. So I've been getting more into her stuff again lately. Tula Lote, I've been looking at a lot of her art, not writing so much, but because I feel like her aesthetic really matches with No Spell. Kind of has a little bit of a vintage feel. So I've been looking at a lot of her art lately, which is inspiring too.
What about other media, TV, films, anything there that's been kind of hooking in for you?
Um, I've been reading some Becky Chambers lately. Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, I'm reading right now, which is a super fun sci-fi. I'm about halfway through it. And it's kind of influencing, and not, it's very different, but it's given me some ideas for the next series that I think I want to start whenever that happens. I was reading that and getting inspired, and kind of late at night one night wrote out a whole overview for another series at some point.
Ooh, wow.
That's been a lot of fun. Stuff I've been watching, I'm watching Sweet Tooth right now, which is awesome. I love the comics, and the show has been good.
How faithful, because I didn't read the comics, how faithful is it to the comic?
It's pretty faithful, not exactly, but pretty faithful. What else have I been watching? Oh, I've been revisiting the Batman animated series. I was doing a little bit of a binge of it last week. I got through most of season 1. I have to go back and start on season 2 again. But it just reminded me how good that show is, like how well it holds up. Of course, it's still so good.
Yeah, well, that one is sort of evergreen, isn't it?
I think it is, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
It's a funny thing, like the animated side of DC has been so great, despite the
Yeah,
fact that the cinematic side has been kind of a hot mess.
yeah, unfortunately.
I wonder what it is about it that, like, why that has happened, why there's like such a clear split between.
Yeah, like why should get to be so good, the
What's
live action. And not that it hasn't, there haven't been good moments, but it's been all over the place for sure.
Yeah, yeah, it's been very inconsistent. You know, there have been films that were horrible, and there have been films that were fine, and then there were a few
Yeah,
like actually really good ones. So it's
yeah,
just been, there's not been a. I feel like the difference for is like there hasn't been on the cinematic side, there hasn't been a cohesive vision.
exactly. Yeah, they haven't really known what they wanted to do.
Are you excited about James Gunn coming in?
I am. I feel like from what I've read of what he's said, that he's trying to put together more of a cohesive image for the universe, which is, I think, like you said, is exactly what they need. So hopefully
Mhm.
that'll actually come to pass.
How do you like some of the sort of less known characters that he's pulling out of the vault? Are you looking forward to that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I do think I think especially for where the DCU is now, it's a good idea because like with Henry Cavill out as Superman, and now there's going to have to be a new I think it just is going to make it an easier transition if we have some of these other characters too. So you're not maybe so immediately comparing it to everything that came before. It'll be a little bit more of a clean break, hopefully.
Hopefully. Well, I'm feeling very optimistic about it based on, Suicide Squad and what he did with
Yeah.
Peacemaker. Um,
Yeah, which were two of the highlights for sure.
Absolutely. So yeah, I'm actually really looking forward to that.
Yeah,
Um,
me too.
so So I know obviously you're taking the Scott Snyder class right now, but is there anybody else, like if you could just pluck anybody out of anywhere and pick their
Mhm.
brain right now, who would it be?
Mm. Oh, Um, I think someone like Gail Simone or Kelly Sue DeConnick would definitely be up there, just because they've been doing like such good stuff for a long time, and like everything they do is so good. I would love to talk to them just about story and writing, and get a cup of coffee with the two of them and just talk about writing for a couple hours. That would be amazing.
That does sound amazing. I had a dream like that one time. Not with them, but but yeah, it was in during the 5 minutes 10 years ago when I thought about being a journalist. Um,
Nice.
I had a dream like having a beer with like Cokie Roberts and I forget who
Nice.
else, but um,
That's one of those dreams and you wake up and you're like disappointed it wasn't real.
yeah, yeah. Um, so did you bring anything for show and tell?
I did. I brought a couple things.
Okay.
Um, the first is, I'm gonna pull it up to make sure that I don't misquote it. It's a poem that I actually have a tattoo based on. um, this one.
Let me see.
It's an Anais Nin poem called Risk.
Hmm.
And it's and then the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bed was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. And then the second one is a Sandman quote that I like for kind of similar reasons. And it's from the Sandman story Fear of Falling, where Morpheus is kind of, I keep losing this Zoom box, where Morpheus is kind of talking to this playwright who has a new play out, and he's afraid of it failing, but he's also afraid of it succeeding. And so he says, you know what happens when you dream of falling? Sometimes you wake up, sometimes the fall kills you, and sometimes when you fall, you fly.
Love that.
So a lot about kind of taking risks and getting out of your comfort zone and all of that good stuff.
So that's a big theme for you.
I feel like it is. It comes out in my stories too. I think it is something that I kind of think about a lot.
Yeah, well, there's something very accessible or very relatable about that
Mhm.
because,
Yeah.
the majority of men, whatever it is, lead lives of quiet desperation. I don't remember
Yeah.
exactly the quote, but um,
Mhm.
but I think there's truth to it that what people would do if they were not afraid of the risk that it involved
Mhm.
would probably be quite different from what they actually are doing.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like I've fallen into that trap of just kind of like over analyzing and trying to like assess every risk of doing something before it even happens, and overthinking to the point where I just don't do the thing. So yeah, trying more not to do that.
Well, I mean, putting art into the world at all involves a certain degree of risk
Yeah, it
because
does.
what if somebody hates it and they're mean
Yeah.
to me?
Exactly.
You know? Um, so I think that like that in some ways is the biggest risk, and that's why people either don't write the story they want to write or they
Mhm.
write it but they never show anybody. Um,
Yeah.
so the fact that you have put as much into the world as
Oh.
you have is um that to me seems like a kind of marker of you at least somewhat conquering that fear of risk that we all
Oh.
have.
Oh, thank you. And you too, everything that you've put out into the world. It's always a risk and it is not easy.
No, no, it sure isn't. I figure my style though is I just kind of run in there without a helmet and figure out as I go what the hell I'm actually doing.
Yeah. Which I think is a good way to be, because then you're not slowing yourself down beforehand.
Yeah, well, I mean, you do a lot of stuff And
Mhm.
then if one thing slows down or it's maybe not going the way you hoped, it's, there's other stuff. Um,
Yeah.
you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Just keep lots of pieces on the board.
Hmm. Hmm.
Hmm.
I think that's good just creatively. I think that's good, you know, not just not just for you in terms of your emotional ability to handle rejection or something not going well, but just I feel if you have the doors open and you keep things coming through, then the doors stay open
Yeah,
because you don't.
I agree. I think it's a cycle because I'm like right now I'm working on the final edits of Scorned April, and I'm also working on a couple shorts that I'm going to submit to some anthologies, and working with Easy on the art for second issue of No Spell. And it's a lot, but it actually feels good to be kind of doing these multiple things. I think it stimulates you creatively and kind of keeps that creative brain flowing and keeps you kind of thinking differently about creative projects so you don't get just sort of stuck in a rut with one thing.
Yeah, well, there's something too about the idea if you hang everything on this one idea or this
Yeah.
one story and then it doesn't go,
Yeah.
what do you have?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Um, and I mean, do you think for you, because you have all these things going too, you have a lot of different pots on the stove, do you feel like those things feed each other?
I think they do. I think it just keeps me like interested, I guess. If I were only working on one story, I think it would, for a long time, I think it would get to the point where maybe I just felt like I had spent so much time on it already and I would lose interest. And even with Scorned April, it's like I've been writing it for so long now.
How
And
long?
I'm still I'm still editing it. I'm getting close to being done with the edits, but I am still editing it even after all this time I spent writing and editing it already. And I think maybe if I didn't have other creative projects too, to kind of like switch back and forth between, it would be a lot. It would be harder to keep the interest going with that one project.
Yeah. Well, I think they must kind of use different parts of your brain or something, though.
Yeah, definitely. Like writing a short is so much different from writing a longer graphic novel or longer series. They do use, I think, different parts of your brain and different storytelling mechanisms and all of that.
Yeah. Well, I think what I would like to do is one of the things that I do that's part of the format is I usually like to do a lightning round at the end.
Okay.
And so after a little bit of thought about what your lightning round should be, um, I decided because anyone who has met you for more than 5 seconds knows you love Batman.
I do. I can see.
Is we're gonna do a shootout between live action Batmans.
Oh, okay.
So you're either gonna enjoy this or you're gonna hate me. All right. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. I'm gonna throw the first pair at you. Don't think about it. Just answer like from the gut. All right.
Okay.
Okay. Christian Bale versus Robert Pattinson.
Pattinson.
Bale versus Batfleck.
Bale.
Batfleck versus Pattinson.
Pattinson.
Pattinson versus Keaton.
uh, that's harder. If Pattinson's going back to the 90s, then Keaton.
Okay.
It's
Keaton versus Bale.
mm, uh, I guess Keaton. I'd say Keaton.
Okay. Keaton versus Adam West.
Uh I mean, you have to give it to Adam West because he's a classic. How can you not say Adam West?
Okay. Bale versus Adam West.
Yeah, I get Adam West.
Okay. Batfleck versus Bale.
Bale.
And finally, Batfleck versus Adam West.
Adam West.
Adam West. He's
Not to bash too much on Ben Affleck.
No, I didn't hate Batfleck.
I don't think it was Ben Affleck himself. I don't think the problem was Ben Affleck. I think the problem was the movies.
I'm afraid that I would have to agree with that. I think he did the best he could.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, I felt sort of bad for him. Like it just wasn't.
There
was a lot.
The best run of Batman movies to be in.
There was a lot that wasn't working there, and it was really hard to tell how much of it was actually him.
Yeah. Yeah, it was.
And then when you put that up against Adam West, it's kind of hard because Adam West is the classic.
Yeah.
The original. So dude, he's so
yeah.
like I remember hearing a story about him and Frank Gorshin going to like a party at the Playboy Mansion and getting kicked out of the orgy because they wouldn't break character.
That's amazing.
And I'm like, I would party with Adam West. He's
Same.
a weird guy.
Yeah. I think he'd be awesome to party with.
Absolutely. I feel like he would just show up in cosplay, like wherever.
Yeah.
Just because he can.
Like he goes out to, I see him going out to dinner and cosplay and.
Yeah, just rolls up in his classic 60s Batman.
Yeah.
The whole thing.
And the Batmobile.
And the Batmobile. All right. Whose Batmobile was the best?
It's so hard.
I know it is. I know it's not fair, and I'm sorry, but
probably Keaton, I think.
Keaton's Keaton's Batmobile.
Because it's so
pretty nice.
Like so 90s stylized, just over the top kind of.
Yeah. Bale's Batmobile kind of looked more like a tank or Humvee or something. Like
yeah. That's a good description.
Yeah, it was it wasn't bad, but it just wasn't the definitive Batmobile.
Yeah.
And then Pattinson, the muscle car.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. I liked that one.
I loved the noise that the engine made, like the first time you see it. The scream, like it's like the roar, and then it like screams, and yeah, I love that.
That movie was so good. The score of that movie was so good too. My Spotify Wrapped at the end of that year was just the Batman soundtrack. Because I'd listen to it like while I was working. And I just like, maybe I need to find some other music.
Or maybe you don't.
True.
Would you do a Batman run if you could? If they called you tomorrow and said, "Hey, do you want to do a Batman run?"
It would be amazing. I feel like I'd want to get a couple more, at least a few more comics under my belt first, but if I ever had the chance to do it, that would be incredible.
Yeah. I bet. I mean, I don't know anybody who actually writes comics
who doesn't want to do Batman.
Who doesn't want to do Batman.
Yeah.
But
I have stories in my head that like I want someone to write, or like I want to write. I'm like, if I ever got the chance to do Batman.
I'm just saying, you never know. All right, you never know.
That's true.
So I'm gonna manifest that for you. I'm putting that into the universe that you get to write some Batman one day.
Fingers crossed.
So I am gonna do our sign off. Give me a moment, and everybody who's been watching and or listening, thanks for watching and listening. Check out Sarah Cooke's Substack, Killer Tater Tots.
Yes.
Is there a story behind that name?
It's based on a story that I wrote in grade school about tater tots coming to life and taking over my school. I think I was in maybe 3rd grade when I wrote it.
That sounds amazing. Now that sounds like a short comic that you should do now.
I should. I've never thought about doing an updated version of it actually, but I should do that.
No, I think so. All right. So thank you for tuning in. I've been your host, Jen Jackalone. Please check out Sarah's Substack at Killer Tater Tots. And take care, you beautiful people, and stay geeky.